welcome to my channel. I'm Maria Drutska, and trust me, you have to press this like button under this video now, because later you will be so charmed and fascinated by today's guest that you will simply forget to do it later. Known as a master strategist, one of the most famous Twitter accounts standing against Kremlin propaganda, influencer, author, the nightmare of the tankies, the state Russian media, embassies, and many others, master of satire and sarcasm, Darth Putin, KGB. Apologies in advance if I have missed anything, because the list is as long as it's impressive. How are you, Darth? Thank you so much for joining us. And how does it feel to be the voice that echoes in the corridors of power, so to say?
Oh, thanks. That's a fine introduction. I will not send you perfume.
Whew. How are you doing recently?
Well, I remain a master strategist. Everything's going exactly according to plan.
Thank you so much for giving me this pleasure and coming to my channel. I honestly admire your consistency. If I'm not mistaken, you have running this account for about 10 years or more. Do you remember how it all started and how you were inspired by what to create Darth Putin KGB?
I thought it would. The guy's got the real guy. My parody has so much that's worth mocking, but for some reason people were taking him really seriously, and I wanted to highlight the other side that people didn't seem to really care about: the assassinations, the terrible butchery in Chechnya, the obvious trend towards a dictatorship. I thought I would just have a little bit of fun with it and see how it goes. And I thought maybe one day I might have 10,000 followers.
Since you have so many new followers, not everyone knows your story about being sent to, let's say, Twitter gulag, so-called, back in 2016. I read those articles. The BBC, The Guardian, Times, CBS, The Atlantic, Al Jazeera, even everyone was writing about your suspension. Tell us about this case.
Yeah, that was a strange time. It wasn't just me. I just happened to, just Darth's account happened to be the one that got the most attention because it was the biggest that was suspended. The account that probably triggered them the most at that particular time was the Sergei Lavrov parody, who, if I recall correctly, was mocking the fact that some random Italian local council that was dominated by the Italian Communist Party had voted to recognize Crimea as part of Russia. And he or she, whoever runs that account, had written something satirical that had been picked up as if it had actually come from the real Sergei Lavrov and had been quoted in an Italian news agency, which of course the account then mocked even further. And it was at about that point that the Kremlin spokeswoman had her meltdown, and several accounts were taken down. Mine just happened to be the last.
Someone from Kremlin or from their media was standing behind?
It was the spokeswoman herself, Maria Zakharovka. She took to her Facebook account and probably 4 or 5 vodka and tonics deep went on a good bender about how it was a CIA operation, Russophobic information operation designed to discredit the Kremlin and sow discord and make everybody's children gay. At the time, the account tweeted just under the name Vladimir Putin, and that was the reason it was technically banned, because apparently the bio wasn't clear that it was parody, which is another way of saying the Kremlin were pretty afraid that people couldn't tell that account apart from the real one, and that they're so ludicrous that beyond a parody that people can't tell them apart from satire, which is actually the case, because that's what had happened to the Sergei Lavrov account.
I remember many governmental officials, like foreign officials, stood for you and against your suspension, what was very
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah. Well, what happened is I was kind of guessing that it would happen, and then I logged in, and there was a message saying your account has been suspended for violating the rules. You can appeal the decision here, which I duly did. But during that period of time, it was mostly Thomas Ilves, who was actually at the time president of Estonia, that he first tweeted it, and then I think it was Gary Kasparov who also made a point, and both of them, compared to the following I had at the time, were really big. I mean, Gary Kasparov still has, well over 1 million followers, and at the time he had like 600,000. So it started getting attention, and then journalists started writing about it because it was pretty obvious that Kremlin had a pretty epic meltdown, and that's just funny. So it started appearing. I don't recall which of the news agencies was the first to run with the story, but it ended up, as you said, in all of the main press agencies in the West. And pretty soon it became a life of its own. And I think the account was shut down for about 5 days. And each day there was several thousand new followers. I recall it was about 50,000 followers at the time, and by the end of the week it was around 70,000. And then the account was reinstated. And at that point, everybody called the account Darth. Nobody called him Vlad or anything. So I just changed the name to Darth Putin, and they decided that's enough.
Huh.
Yeah, it seemed to have the exact opposite effect of what they were trying to get. I'm sure that they felt within their, I'm speculating, but I'm sure that within the confines of the Kremlin universe, they felt they had to do something, but they didn't realize that they were actually inadvertently shining a light on their own. So yeah,
Okay, I
that was a
wonder.
pretty wild time.
But to continue this topic, that you said that many people actually thought that you could be a real Vladimir Putin. Does Darth receive private messages still from people who actually think that you are a real president of Russia? Maybe they are still like asking you to, stop being dicks, stop wars, and just in general stop genociding other nations. Do you have some funny stories to tell us about, like some hilarious messages that Darths receiving in direct messages, maybe some marriage proposals, some interesting date proposals? Tell us, Darth.
Well, I've had the odd humorous marriage proposal, but Darth always just responds that that's fine as long as we can see other people as well. Occasionally in the mentions, in the early days, there was the odd soccer mom from Middle America that seemed to think that it was the real thing. That's kind of tragic. Um, Sort of a foreshadowing of how popular he is among the American right. Occasionally these days, if it does happen, it's usually somebody to whom I wouldn't actually really want to respond because it's somebody whose first language isn't English, and from a society, I think, where political satire is something, it is usually quite dangerous, so they wouldn't necessarily assume that somebody would just do this for the fun of it.
There are second type of people what I was also interested in, because your content, what you write about, usually on sensitive topics as well. For example, if taking even the last year, the first year of war that Putin started in Ukraine, we had horrible missiles attacks, like big ones, on Kramatorsk railway station, for example, where a lot of civilians, a lot of children died. Or, for example, when Russian missile hit residential building in Dnipro, just when people were still sleeping, it was early morning. There were also many civilian casualties, many children died, and you also speak about this. So these kind of topics, or deaths of children, or strikes on the playgrounds, maternal hospitals, um, blowing up prisoners of war, everything that Putin, Kremlin, and Russia could violate all the conventions and laws. They have already done it. So how do you strike a balance between humor and the serious topics that you address? And do you have people who DM you or write in comments that it's bad, why are you posting about it, why are you laughing at this? So how do you find this balance, and do you have some topics that you avoid?
There have been people who have quite deliberately virtue signalled that it isn't funny. To which I would say, well, only a psychopath would think it is funny. The thing is it's not about trying to be funny. It's more about trying to point out the hypocrisies and inconsistencies of it. So a lot of the time, Darth will just say something that's factually accurate, and it's just a flat-out statement. So one of them that really triggered it was when they were trying to suppress their COVID death rate and try to present this image that Russia was doing really, really well against COVID because of its, for whatever particular reason that they happen to want to push that particular week. And a number of doctors suspiciously fell out of windows. And after about the third or the fourth one did it, I made some comments. So it's not actually funny, but it is true. So I've always taken the attitude that all I'm doing is holding up a mirror. If you don't like what's in the mirror, then that's not my fault. And then when it comes to the kind of atrocities that you're talking about, the idea is to try to express it in a way that's very close to what the Kremlin would say, but is slightly misworded to reveal an accidental truth. So if they claim to be denazifying Ukraine, so obviously that involves bombing hospitals and kindergartens and theatres full of people and so on. So, that's just a statement. So it isn't, in my opinion, particularly funny that their attitude, that they're denazifying Ukraine by bombing Holocaust memorials and defending Christian values by bombing cathedrals. That in itself isn't funny, but it's true. And I think that's probably the thing that appeals to people, is that it reveals it's a subversive way of revealing a hidden truth, that this is what actually that they're doing. And if you compare it to what they're actually saying, there's a chasm of that can be filled with satire. So that's how Darth works. So as I said in the author's note of the first book, is that the situation isn't funny. Only a psychopath would think it's funny. But that doesn't mean that the people who are trying to justify it should be taken seriously and are above being mocked. So that's the point of difference. The people who are trying to excuse this are the ones we should be laughing at, and it's fair game to laugh at them. They're usually ludicrous people. So that's the difference. I'm not trying to say, absolutely not trying to say it's funny that a maternity hospital got bombed and a bunch of babies were incinerated. I mean, that's self-evidently not funny. But the people who are trying to explain, to try and come up with these ever more ludicrous excuses for it, they're fair targets.
Especially since Russia's full-scale invasion, I think these type of pointing out things became like a mainstream, I noticed, and people of course understand that it's not funny, but it is the way to point it out, that it is so absurd that you can even talk like that on the higher level, on the official way. So it is the way, well, especially being Ukrainian and watching Ukrainian lives, people's lives, they use these as a tool as well to basically survive and to bear all the difficulties that Ukrainian people are facing now. So yeah, I absolutely agree with you, and I think very few people think that it is something funny, but rather than it is a good way to point out these atrocities and this horrible.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is that the Kremlin is desperate to be taken seriously. Even though it's patently not. Then they're not. He's not a serious person in many ways. I mean, well, that's possibly not a good way of putting it, but topless horseback riding and publicity stunts where he's dressed up as a giant condom flying with a bunch of migrating birds and shooting pre-tranquilized Siberian tigers and buggering about in a Bond villain submarine. I mean, that's all completely comical, but they're desperate that the messaging that they put out should be taken seriously. That's why they spend so much money doing it. The budget for their state propaganda apparatus is massive. It's hundreds of millions of dollars. They do it in many languages. They do it for a reason. And there's a reason they won't allow it to be done in Russia back to them. And the one thing that really annoys them the most is to be just seen as a figure of fun. The At Ukraine account did it beautifully a couple of years ago when whichever official Kremlin channel in Crimea put out some picture of how wonderful it was in Soviet Crimea, everybody holding hands and singing Kumbaya and whatever. And whoever ran the account just wrote a toxic X right here with a finger pointing down. And that particular tweet must have been retweeted 50,000 times. And that must have really annoyed the Kremlin because they're trying to put out this message that life under Soviet rule was wonderful. Everybody's happy, and the people in Crimea are delighted to return to it. And very soon they'll start living the Russian experience that they see on TV rather than they see with their eyes. So they're desperate to be taken seriously, even as they say ever more completely ludicrous things. And to be reduced to little more than figures of fun is something that they really struggle to deal with. And that, I think, is something that Darth does quite well, and that's one of the reasons that I've lost count of how many of their embassy accounts have blocked it. Because when you try to put out a serious message, and suddenly all of your replies are just swamped with people laughing at you, it defeats the purpose. So that's why they block it. That's why they block it.
By the way, well, since you mentioned the blocking part, of course you have a huge following, including famous people, including presidents, prime ministers, governmental officials, and you obviously pissed off so many famous pro-Russian accounts, their governmental accounts, as well as other foreign pro-Russian accounts. Tell us some funny or ridiculous engagement or arguments that you had with these famous people or big people from our, let's say, political, defense, foreign affairs circle.
Mostly it's about the fact, these days, it's the fact that their predictions have just fallen flat in their face. And of course it was from basically December 2021 until February the 20th, 2022, it was a lot of people sitting very smugly and saying this is all just Western mainstream media manufacturing a crisis because they want to pump up the price of defense stocks or something. And then, of course, reality is a very stubborn thing, and Russia did invade. So there are a lot of people who blocked Darth for being reminded of their previously bad takes because Darth accidentally predicted. Well, I didn't accidentally predict the invasion was going to happen. That one I was fairly sure about from sort of December. But I accidentally predicted the exact date of the invasion by saying that there are now somebody pointed out that there are now 20 odd days of the Olympics left, and I said, well, that means there are 21 days before Russia can invade Ukraine, because he wasn't going to get permission to do it during the Olympics that China was hosting. And as luck would have it, that fell on the 24th. So, Darth's predictions will stand up against anybody's, frankly. I've got a pretty good track record of predicting things, predicting Russian behavior. I remain a master strategist. Plus, just don't believe anything till the Kremlin denies it.
Sometimes I wonder how TASS media that you like to quote tweet, how they haven't blocked you yet, because I think each of their posts, each of their message is so amazing to be mocked. It's so amazing to have a Darth comments on that. It's just ridiculous how they still haven't blocked you yet.
I can only assume two things. One is that they would end up looking more stupid than they currently do, which is probably the only thing left they could do to look more stupid. And
But
then I
they
think,
learn to write the comments, because otherwise you would
yeah,
leave, and fellas, NAFO fellas would just leave hundreds of comments under their tweets.
yeah, they got a new editor because the previous one got sacked because apparently the Kremlin wasn't very impressed with the coverage of Prigozhin's mutiny, putsch, march for justice, whatever you want to call it. And then after the new one came in, that's when they started limiting the replies. The only other thing I can think of is that when they're all competing for the share of the propaganda budget, they probably have to demonstrate. This is supposition on my part. I have no evidence for this whatsoever, but they probably have to demonstrate how much engagement they're actually getting. And by saying we've grown our followership from 25,000 Twitter followers to 130,000 Twitter followers, that must mean we're really good. Give us more money. That's one way of polishing that particular turd. They haven't realised that the growth, the 100,000 people that follow them are all there just to abuse them. So that part probably doesn't get in there. So those are the only two reasons I can think of. I have wondered when they're going to when they'll block me. I don't know. It would be sad because they're just so very, very easy to mock. But then all they do is just regurgitate whatever particular official statement there is. Where I think recently they said that Ukraine is putting anti-aircraft missile systems in urban areas in contrast to, in defiance of international law. We should be allowed to bomb Ukrainians' urban areas without the Ukrainians breaking international law by trying to stop it. That's just writes itself.
I like to remind them that there are literally like clowns in Kremlin, and all of this, it just looks like circus. Honestly, sometimes I sit down and think like how, like, either propaganda is real, like it is such a strong tool indeed, especially when you've been doing that for what, after Soviet Union collapse, probably until, well, before and after especially, right? So at least like 20, 30 years. Other people call us similar nations, brothers, sisters, whatever they like to call us. I mean, we are different. Our mindset is different, our values, attitude are different, but it's not like we are on different planet or different continent. And I still sometimes cannot believe how these like ridiculous, stupid things can get into people's minds so easy, and they actually believe in that.
I honestly don't know why that particular society is so receptive to such a volume of patently ludicrous propaganda.
Right.
A lot of people with qualifications of the topic have written about it, and Vlad Lexer writes quite well on it. So he's, I honestly don't know, but I assume when, as a society, no one's told you the truth for 80 years, then it becomes very easy to believe absurdity.
Absolutely, exactly.